Psalms 73. And I like to talk about a supreme fellowship. Now, I don't know about you, but actually 30 years of pastoring, I'll tell you what, there's nothing better than to be in a church and fellowship. And what I'm talking about, that it don't have to be that we shake hands or whatever, but can you imagine that somebody, maybe they get up and testify? And I'll tell you what, it's a joy, it's a blessing when somebody gets up and testifies, and maybe you've not heard them testify much, or maybe they've never testified or whatever, but it's just hear somebody testify. I'll tell you what, it'll turn heads, won't it? When somebody testifies that's never testified before, it'll turn heads. And really, we are to pray. And when I asked everybody to mind the Lord or pray, Lord, what would you have me to do? And really, we may not realize it. But we, people we go to church with and people we fellowship with and people we got respect for and whatever. And when we mind the Lord and the Spirit's in it, that people get blessed. It'll fill our cup, and when that cup gets full enough, it'll go over, and that's certainly the way we get blessed. Is when somebody minds the Lord, and even we'll be blessed too if we mind the Lord. But somebody, I believe, a lot of times, always gets blessed when people mind the Lord. But there's a supreme fellowship. 73 verse 24 and 25, and that's the two verses I want to read tonight. And it says in Psalm 73 verse 24 and 25, and 24 says, "Thou shalt guide me with thy counsel, and afterward receive me to glory. Whom have I in heaven but thee? And there is none upon earth that I desire beside thee." And certainly, I believe that I'm going to talk about three things tonight that certainly I believe if we really take it to heart, that it would be a blessing to us. The fellowship, it says, the first thing that I want to mention, it belongs to those who fellowship, those who follow God's counsel. And that's the first part of that verse 24. "Thou shalt guide me with thy counsel." Can't you imagine, even in preaching, let me go ahead and say this. And I don't know where you've ever, and probably every one of us here, and I believe you have fellowship with God. I really do. I believe there's probably not a person here that don't have a time when they fellowship with Him. And there's nothing like it. And a lot of times maybe, I say sometimes I get on my knees and I pray, and I try to pray the fervent prayer of a righteous man. I try to pray that way. But my prayers sometimes it feels like to me that they're not reaching even the ceiling. Do you ever do that? That it's just not going through like it ought to. And then after a while, a time or two like that, I begin to question myself, Lord, are they something wrong? Are they something in my life that's hindering me from receiving the blessings or to receive the fellowship that I need with you? And boy, I'll tell you what, God don't have no problem with telling us what it is. Sometimes it's us. As a pastor, and you wouldn't believe it, how that the old devil works when we get in that circumstances and we're not having fellowship with God. The old devil works and says, "Sam, something wrong. What do you need to do? What have I got to do?" And it gets on their mind. And then we begin to talk with God and say, "God, what's wrong? And we find out that it's ourselves. I find out a lot of times it's myself. And I let the old devil put so much on my mind. He gets me, and thoughts like that. Do you ever look at somebody and when you look at them, their countenance was just different than what it was, and you look and say, they got something against me. Or they got something wrong. And old devil says, yeah, just look at their eyes, look at their face, look at their mouth. Look the way their expressions is. Or they're not looking me eyeball to eyeball. And listen, friends, and the old devil just throws it and throws it and throws it. And pretty soon we have to tell the devil to get behind. When we do that, we realize that it's not there, it's not as big, it's not a problem if we don't let it be a problem. And sometimes a pastor, we let it be a problem. But, if we walk in the counsel of God, God tells us to pray without ceasing. God tells us to read and study. God tells us how to walk. I mean, this is His counsel. He teaches us. When we open our Bible and it looks, and the psalmist here says, and notice what he says here in 24, thou shalt guide me with thy counsel. Well, Lord, I'd rather have the Lord tell me what to do as anybody, wouldn't you? He'll never tell us wrong. He'll never tell us anything wrong. When He guides us with His counsel, listen, friends, what He says is true. And actually, when He come here on this earth, can't you imagine? And I know, no doubt, when He come and walked on this earth, and they wasn't the Bible, the books of the Bible like they are right now that we have. But yet, they inspired through I believe, men of God that were inspired by God to write the gospel, good news, tell about Jesus, and what He done. And then Paul comes along and writes the epistles to all the other churches, those that he evangelized in and won people to the Lord. And listen, friends, and he didn't quit there. He didn't give up. A lot of times it was 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians and other books. Timothy, 1st and 2nd. John, as he wrote those books. 1 John, there was St. John, and the little John we talk about. 1st and 2nd and 3rd John. But his counsel. And then he goes on down to say, in the second one, it assures us a great reward. When we walk in His counsel, there ain't nothing like being in the fellowship of God. There ain't nothing like to have that fellowship. And I know that people can get out of fellowship. I've been out of fellowship, and my life was miserable. I got out of fellowship one time, and I always tell this story that I thought the worldly possessions and everything was more important than what God was. And I told this many a time that I went and bought an old truck back in 76. And I was paying $99 a month, had a payment due on Friday. My check wasn't big enough to pay that $99. And I thought, well, I went and called a fellow, and he said he'd haul a load in for me on Friday if I could cut a load of paperwood. So I come in on a Wednesday night, run and got the saw. And I said, Millie, I'm not going to church, you go on. And I started to step out of the woodshed backwards where that saw about stepped on Millie. She's right there, and she said, what are you doing? I'm getting my saw. She said, tonight's church night. I said, Millie, I've got to have that money. And I told you when I'd married you that I'd supply everything I could for you. She said, but Sam, God will help us. God will take care of us. And I said, I know that, but He gives us enough common sense to take care of ourselves. And I headed towards that woods. with that saw and a can of gas and a can of oil and got nearly down to the woods and got thinking about it. Who am I to question God or what God can't do or what God can do? And I turned back and I was still mad. I was mad at Billy. I was mad because I'd let this go and couldn't pay this bill. And I threw that old chainsaw in the woodshed and set the old can down and went in there. And I'll tell you, that night I went to church and God sent me from one end to the other. The preacher stood up there and you don't believe how much, he burnt my hide. And I realized that God and serving Him is the most important thing in the world. I went to the altar that night and I said, Lord, forgive me. Joy, I got back in fellowship. I went home and I said, Millie, I'm sorry. I got mad at you. And I went in there and I was going to pray over that bank book. I thought, how many times we pray over things, and I was going in there to pray over that bank book. And I pulled out that bank book and I looked at it. And I looked at the date and I thought a minute and I looked back and I thought, well, that bank payment ain't due Friday. It was 2 weeks from Friday and I had 2 checks and didn't even realize it. See, there's a greater reward when we walk in His counsel. Listen, friends, when we serve Him to the best of our ability, there's a great reward and glory for us one day after a while. Eyes not seen, ears not heard. Neither has it entered into the hearts of men. When we walk in His counsel, we understand there's a great reward. But the third one is, and like I said, there's nothing better than having fellowship, not only with God. You think about this for a minute. God tells us that He tells us that when they come to Him and ask Him the 2 greatest commandments, He said, love God with all thy heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love thy neighbor as thyself. You ever think about, there's nothing like having fellowship with God, but there's nothing like having fellowship one with another. The Bible tells us to pray one for another. Every one of us has probably got somebody that certainly has stepped on our toes or hurt our feelings or maybe done us wrong. And you know what God tells us to do? Pray for them. God tells us to pray for them. And there's nothing any better when we have that relationship with God. And I know you're going to look at me and say, there's some people you just can't have a relation, and I agree. There are some people that won't let you. But that still don't mean that we can't pray for them. That still don't mean that God can't get a hold of them and turn things around. I've had people to come and apologize. I had a fellow one time that about died, and he came to me. And he thought I had something. He had said something to hurt my feelings, and he said, Brother Sam, I want to apologize to you. I said something to hurt your feelings, and I said, you did. And he said, yeah. And I said, you're forgiven. I didn't hold nothing. And I feel good about it. We have a good relationship now. We brought it back together. There's nothing like that. Lost people look for that fellowship and that relationship that we have as Christians. There's a fellow I worked with, I invited to church, being raised in another denomination. And he was raised in a denomination that when you talked about a born-again experience, he just didn't agree with you. But I'd witnessed to him, and I'd begged him to come to church with me. And one day, he said, I'm coming to church Sunday night. And he came. And people got up and testified, and they talked about how they love Jesus and love one another. And they talked about how that we need to love one another. I went back into work the next day, and I walked up beside him, and I said, boy, I sure appreciate you coming. He looked, and he said, hey, he said, do you think them people love one another like they are too? And I said, I can't tell personally how they feel. I just know the way I feel. If I keep it right between me and God, I don't have to worry about nothing else, do it, huh? I mean, I don't. If it's right between me and God, I don't have to worry about nothing else. But we, as individuals, need to keep it right between us and God. We need to have that fellowship. We need to have that fellowship. And so tonight you got the message. And I was about 5 minutes longer than I was going to be. So I'm going to step down and let them go over the program. And God bless you this week. Have a good time. Put on a smile. I don't care how bad it is. I don't care if your boss is hateful. I don't care if your husband's hateful or your wife's hateful. Turn around and give them a big smile. Turn around and give them a big smile. All right. Everybody's at liberty to go. It needs to go or whatever.